My name is Dorothy Sullivan, and I am 73 years old. 6 months ago, I buried my husband of 43 years, Frank. Since then, grief has been my shadow. It lingers in the corners of every room, whispers in the quiet moments, and presses against my chest at night when the house feels too big and too empty. I thought losing Frank would be the hardest trial of my life. I was wrong. The real heartbreak came standing in my own kitchen, staring at my only son. "Stop whining. It's already sold." Those words cut me deeper than any funeral hymn ever could. My son, Mike, 42 years old, leaned against my counter like a stranger. His arms were crossed, his expression cold, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience standing in his way. I was still rinsing dishes when the words hit me. Water dripped from my hands, pooling on the floor. In my grip was Frank's favorite coffee mug, trembling so violently I thought it might shatter. "You sold your father's Rolex." My voice cracked on the word father. Mike didn't even blink. "I needed the money for our trip to Italy." "Mom, seriously, get over it." "It's just a watch, just a watch." I felt my knees weaken. That Rolex was no ordinary piece of jewelry. Frank bought it in 1978, the year Mike was born, after working 3 months of overtime. He wore it every day of our marriage. And when the hospital returned it to me, in a plastic bag along with his wedding ring, I wound it each morning, the way Frank used to, just to feel close to him. It wasn't a watch. It was a heartbeat. "Which pawn shop?" I asked. My voice was low, dangerous, even to my own ears. Before Mike could answer, my daughter-in-law Ashley looked up from her phone. She had perfected a tone I despised, syrupy and sharp at the same time. "Oh good, she's being reasonable now," she said. "Dorothy, clinging to material possessions isn't healthy. Frank wouldn't want you living in the past." I bit down hard, tasting blood, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Ashley had been telling me what Frank would want since the funeral, always when it benefited her and Mike. "Golden State Pawn on Milwaukee Avenue," Mike said, glancing at his Apple Watch, the irony almost unbearable. "They gave me 800. 800. For a Rolex Submariner that was worth at least 3,000. 800 for the one thing that had tethered me to Frank since his death." "You had no right," I whispered. Ashley gave a smug little laugh. "It wasn't even running properly. Honestly, you're better off without it. Better off without it. Without Frank's memory, without his touch. Without the ritual that kept me sane through nights of emptiness." I straightened my shoulders, looking Mike directly in the eye. "I'm going to get it back." Mike shrugged, already walking toward the door. "Good luck with that. We fly out tomorrow morning." Ashley's been planning this trip for months. Ashley slipped on her expensive sunglasses, pausing just long enough to deliver her parting shot. "Dorothy, you should really consider therapy. This obsession isn't normal." The door slammed, and the silence left behind felt heavier than grief itself. I stood in my Chicago kitchen, the November light pale against the window, the smell of dish soap still clinging to my hands. My son thought he had sold off the last piece of his father for pocket money. My daughter-in-law thought she had broken me. But they were both wrong. I am 73 years old. I am a widow. And I am done being treated like I am powerless. They thought they'd taken everything from me for $800. They had no idea what I was capable of. I would get Frank's watch back, no matter what it took. The next morning, I wrapped Frank's scarf around my neck and stepped out into the brittle Chicago cold. My son thought I would just let it go. He underestimated me. 40 years as a bank manager had taught me one lesson: above all, people lie, but numbers and determination do not. Golden State Pawn sat on Milwaukee Avenue, its front window crowded with guitars, chipped jewelry, and electronics that had seen better days. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed with a sickly hum, illuminating a place that smelled of dust and old regrets. The man behind the counter looked up as I entered. His arms were inked with tattoos, his expression worn, like he'd heard every sob story in the world. "You hear about the Rolex?" he asked before I even opened my mouth. My breath caught. "How did you?" He shrugged, almost apologetic. "Your son warned me you might show up. Said you were having a hard time letting go." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. My own child had painted me as a delusional old woman to a stranger. I steadied myself, forcing my voice to stay even. "I'll buy it back. Whatever you need." His name tag read Danny, shifted uncomfortably. "It's already sold. Guy came in this morning, paid cash." No returns in this business. My knees nearly buckled. Some stranger was walking around Chicago with Frank's watch, the last piece of him I could touch. All because my son needed spending money for a vacation. Danny's voice lowered. But there's something you should know. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small manila envelope. He slid it across the counter toward me. Why found this when we were cleaning the watch? Hidden compartment in the back. Real professional job, had to be done by a jeweler. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. My eyes blurred as I recognized the handwriting. Frank's neat, careful script. Dorothy's birthday, July 15, 1955, the day I knew I'd marry her. Beneath that, a string of numbers and letters, S4457 CH80 Findices. I stared, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Frank had never mentioned anything about a hidden compartment. In 43 years of marriage, not once. You recognize those numbers? Danny asked. I shook my head, though something about them tugged at my memory. They looked like a code, maybe a password, maybe an account. Frank had always been meticulous with records, keeping every receipt, every statement filed in precise order. The guy who bought the watch, I said suddenly. What did he look like? Danny hesitated, his jaw tightening. Why? Because my husband hid this for a reason, I whispered, and whoever bought that watch might be in for a surprise. Danny studied me for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. Finally, he sighed. He didn't give me a name. Paid cash. But when I mentioned we'd found something inside, he got real interested. Asked if we'd opened it. A chill ran through me, sharper than the wind outside. Did he know what he was looking for? I asked. Danny's eyes flickered, uneasy. He came in asking about recent Rolexes specifically. Like he was hunting for that one watch. I slipped the folded paper into my purse. The weight of it felt like a live coal, burning against my side. Frank had hidden something from me for 43 years. Something he thought I wasn't ready to know. And now, not only had I found it, but a stranger out there knew it existed too. I left the pawn shop with the sound of Danny's wary voice echoing behind me. Business is business. But this was no longer about business. It was about secrets. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to uncover what my husband had been hiding all those years. Back home, the silence felt heavier than ever. The house smelled faintly of Frank's cologne, the one I still kept on his dresser, even though the bottle was nearly empty. I clutched my purse to my chest, the folded scrap of paper burning like a brand against my ribs. I walked into Frank's study, his sanctuary for decades. The oak desk was polished, every drawer lined with neatly stacked folders. He had been an accountant before retiring, meticulous in everything. Taxes, bills, insurance records. He kept them all with a precision that sometimes annoyed me, but now felt like salvation. I sat down, laid the slip of paper in front of me, and read it again. SS4457 CA says underneath, in his careful handwriting, Dorothy's birthday. The day I knew I'd marry her. My birthday was February 12th. July 15th wasn't my birthday. It was the day we first met. A summer dance in 1955 under strings of yellow lights. Frank always said he knew that night. Watching me in a blue dress I'd borrowed from my sister, that I would be his wife someday. Why would he write that date here? I grabbed one of Frank's old ledgers and began flipping through. Receipts, property tax records, savings bonds, the usual. But none of it explained the code. I whispered aloud, thinking like he would. SSCH0815. SS could be Social Security. But Frank's number didn't start with 4457, CH Chicago. It was where we'd lived our whole lives. That was our wedding anniversary, August 15th, and DS my initials. Dorothy Sullivan. My chest tightened. He had woven me into the code. I opened Frank's laptop, an old, battered Dell, and typed the string into a search bar. Results flooded in, but nothing matched. Bank accounts, investment firms, encryption. The possibilities spun in my mind until it all blurred together. At last, a result caught my eye: Secure Solutions Investment Management, Cayman Islands. The website was plain, discreet, built for people who didn't want to be found. My stomach flipped. The login page required a client number. On a whim, I typed the SS457CH8FFDS. The screen paused, then shifted. Valid account number. Please enter password. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the desk to steady them. Frank had always told me we lived paycheck to paycheck. Every argument we had about money, every time I clipped coupons, patched his shirts, or skipped vacations, he had insisted there was nothing extra. But now I was staring at proof that my husband had kept a secret account offshore. I tried the obvious passwords: our wedding date, our address, my real birthday, nothing. And then I remembered the note. Dorothy's birthday, the day I knew I'd marry her. Not my actual birthday. The day we met, July 15th, 1955. With trembling fingers, I typed Yo7 to find 555. The screen blinked once. Then the words appeared: access granted. My breath caught. The numbers on the screen blurred until they sharpened into focus: current balance. The 24070 of 296.73. Nearly $3 million. Hidden secret. Untouched. I pressed a hand against my chest, unable to breathe. Frank hadn't just been hiding a watch. He had been hiding a fortune. And if Mike ever found out, the phone on the desk rang, shrill and jarring. I flinched, snatching it up with clammy hands. Mike's name glowed on the screen. Mom. His voice came through, smooth but tighter than usual. Ashley said you went to the pawn shop today. You didn't make a scene, did you? I gripped the phone, the code still glowing on Frank's monitor. No, Mike, I said carefully. I went to buy back your father's watch, but someone else already purchased it. A pause. Too long. Well, see? Problem solved. You can move on now, he said casually, but his voice carried an edge. So, did you find anything inside the watch? My blood ran cold. He knew. Did you find anything inside the watch? Mike's words hung in the air like a trap I could almost see. My pulse hammered against my throat. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. How do you know there was anything inside? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Silence crackled on the line. Then, too quickly, just wondering. Pawn shops sometimes hide stuff in old pieces to jack up the price. You know, scams. I closed my eyes. He was lying. 42 years old, and I could still hear it in his voice as clearly as when he was a teenager caught sneaking out at night. Nothing important, I said finally, forcing my tone flat. Just some numbers. Probably nothing. But instead of calming him, my vagueness made him alert. I could hear the shift in his breathing. What exactly did the numbers say? Something in his voice, tight, urgent, sent ice down my spine. For the first time, Mike sounded invested in something that belonged to his father. I let out a brittle laugh. Yesterday, you told me to stop living in the past. Today, you suddenly care about Frank's watch. I'm just trying to help, he said too fast. Look, Mom, maybe I should come over. Help you sort through Dad's things. I know it's overwhelming. I almost laughed again, but it came out bitter. Help me, by stealing his watch. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, he sighed. Fine, be stubborn. But don't come crying to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing ghosts. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my knuckles white around the receiver. He wanted that code. He knew there was more to Frank's watch than jewelry. And now he knew I had it. Slowly, I turned back to Frank's laptop. The numbers still glowed on the screen: 2,470, 296.73. It wasn't just money. It was a secret big enough to make my own son circle me like a vulture. I closed the laptop and slipped the folded paper into a book on Frank's shelf. If Mike, or Ashley, showed up unannounced again, I couldn't risk them finding it. As I walked through the house, every shadow felt heavier, every creak of the floorboards sharper. For the first time, I wasn't just grieving. I was being hunted. That night, sleep was impossible. I tossed in bed. Frank's empty pillow a reminder that the only man who could explain all of this was gone. By 2 a.m, I gave up. I padded into his study, pulled the laptop back onto the desk, and logged in again. The glowing balance, nearly $3 million, stared at me like an accusation. For decades, Frank had told me we lived paycheck to paycheck. Every coupon I clipped, every patched shirt I sewed, every vacation we skipped, it had all been under that illusion. But this account proved otherwise. I clicked account history. The earliest entry made my breath catch: 1982. Deposit 5,000. Note initial inheritance investment. Frank never told me about any inheritance. His father had died when Mike was 2, and I remembered the modest sum we'd used to pay off the mortgage. But 5,000 quietly invested offshore. That was something else. I scrolled through the years. Small deposits, 500, 1,000, steady, careful. Then, around 2008, the numbers jumped, tens of thousands at a time. The notes chilled me: real estate liquidation, Chicago properties. Frank had been buying and selling real estate, without ever telling me. He had built an empire in the shadows of our marriage. Why? I opened a folder labeled Messages. Inside was one document locked. Password required. I tried the date of our wedding anniversary. Wrong. My birthday. Wrong. Then I remembered the note again, Dorothy's birthday. The day I knew I'd marry her. I typed 0755. The file opened. My heart pounded as a video screen filled with Frank's face, older, more tired than I remembered. His eyes carrying secrets he'd never spoken. He sat in his office, the background familiar. Dorothy, his voice said, steady but sad. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And something has gone wrong. I gripped the edge of the desk as he continued. I hoped you'd never need to see this. But the money isn't really mine. It was my father's. He made me promise to protect it, to use it only if our family was ever in danger. Danger. The word hung like smoke in the air. Frank leaned closer to the camera, his hand rubbing his face in that familiar way he always did when weighing heavy problems. I built it slowly, carefully. I reinvested every penny. It grew beyond what even I expected. But it was never about wealth, Dorothy. It was insurance, a shield. Because I fear that one day, the danger won't come from outside, but from within our own family. The screen froze on his wary face. My chest ached. Frank hadn't just been planning for financial stability. He had been preparing for war. And now, watching my son circle me like a predator, I realized Frank had been right. When Frank's video ended, the study fell silent except for the soft hum of the desk lamp. I sat frozen, my hands pressed flat against the wood, staring at the still frame of his face. Danger from within our own family. My son. Frank had meant Mike. The thought churned inside me like acid. I wanted to dismiss it, to cling to the memory of the little boy, clutching a baseball glove too big for his hand. But the man who had stolen his father's watch, who now demanded to know what secrets it contained, that was not the boy I raised. I needed more answers. I pulled open the lowest drawer of Frank's filing cabinet, the one he always kept locked. The key had been taped underneath the desk, exactly where he'd hidden spares for years. Inside were folders stacked neatly, labeled in his careful block handwriting: taxes, insure, investments. Behind them, almost hidden, was a thin brown folder marked only private. My stomach tightened. I slid it out, hands shaking. Inside were contracts, property deeds, correspondence about real estate. I flipped through page after page until one document stopped me cold. A letter dated 6 months before Frank's death. The header: Chen Investigations Confidential Report. I began to read. Mr. Sullivan, per your request, I have completed the investigation into your son, Michael Sullivan's financial activities. My findings are concerning. Your son has accumulated approximately $180,000 in gambling debts to several offshore betting sites. He has taken out multiple high-interest loans against his business using fraudulent information about his income and assets. Of greater concern are the inquiries Mr. Sullivan has been making regarding your estate. My breath caught. The report went on to describe how Mike had spoken to lawyers about contesting wills, researched power of attorney procedures, and even looked into having Frank declared legally incompetent. By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling so badly I had to set the papers down. Frank had known. He'd suspected his own son was plotting to strip us both of everything. And rather than confront me with it, rather than shatter the fragile peace of our family, he had quietly hired a private investigator to gather proof. I pressed the report to my chest, tears stinging my eyes, grief for Frank, fury at Mike, shame that I had been blind to the truth right in front of me. The phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone slicing through the silence. I nearly dropped the report. I walked to the receiver and picked it up with a shaking hand. Dorothy. Ashley's voice purred through the line, sickly sweet. Mike and I just wanted to check on you before our flight. Are you doing okay? Her voice dripped with false concern, but underneath I heard it, sharp, eager curiosity. They weren't checking on me. They were checking on the code. My grip tightened on the phone. For the first time in months, my fear turned into something hotter, sharper, more dangerous. Tell Mike, I said coldly, that I know exactly what he's been planning. And his father knew too. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Then Ashley's voice snapped like a whip. What did you say? I hung up before she could finish. For the first time since Frank's death, I felt steady. I had their secret. And now I had Frank's proof. 2 nights later, I was still sitting in Frank's study, the investigator's report spread across the desk like a battlefield map. Every line confirmed what I already knew deep down: my son was not here to protect me. He was planning to destroy me. At 8:00 p.m., I heard the sound I dreaded most, the jingle of keys in my front door. Ashley. She'd insisted on keeping a spare, to check on me, after Frank's funeral. I'd been too numb then to refuse. Now the door swung open without warning, and their voices carried down the hall. "Dorothy, are you home?" Ashley called out, her tone artificially bright, like honey masking poison. I shoved the report back into its folder and minimized the Cayman account page on Frank's laptop. By the time they appeared in the doorway, I was sitting calmly, sorting through a stack of tax records. Mike carried a small suitcase, his coat draped over his arm. Ashley, in designer boots and that perpetual smug smile, looked like she'd just stepped out of a glossy magazine. "Just wanted to say goodbye before we head to the airport," Mike said casually, but his eyes weren't on me. They were scanning the desk, flicking over every paper like a predator looking for prey. "What are you working on?" he asked too quickly. "Sorting through your father's things," I replied evenly. "There's so much I never knew about." Ashley stepped closer, her gaze sliding to the laptop. "Find anything interesting?" The question sounded casual, but her eyes gleamed sharp as glass. I forced a smile. "Just old bank statements and receipts. Your father kept everything." Mike relaxed slightly, but I caught the twitch in his jaw. "Yeah, Dad was obsessive. Probably has receipts from 20 years ago in there." I leaned back in the chair, letting the silence stretch before I spoke. "Actually, I did find something odd. Some kind of investment account I'd never seen before. Nothing major, just a few thousand." The effect was immediate. Mike froze, his casual act slipping. Ashley's smile faltered. "An investment account," Mike repeated. His voice was tight, almost cracking. "What kind?" I shrugged. "Not sure yet. The paperwork's confusing. I might need to hire an accountant to figure it out." Ashley shot him a quick look, her mask of sweetness barely holding. "We could help with that. Mike's very good with financial documents." I kept my voice calm, almost bored. "That's very kind, but I already made an appointment with Frank's old firm. They'll know how to handle it properly." Mike's jaw clenched. Ashley's eyes hardened. For a moment, I thought Ashley might lunge across the desk. Instead, she forced another tight smile. "Of course. We only want to help." The tension was thick enough to choke on. I stood, straightening my back, meeting Ashley's stare with my own. "Your father left me a private message." "Private, meaning it's none of your business." Her face flushed, red rising like fire under her skin. "Excuse me. You heard me," I said coldly. "Some things weren't meant for you." For the first time, Mike looked small, like a boy caught stealing, his shoulders slumping. But Ashley's hand shot out, gripping his arm like a leash. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said, my voice steady as steel. "It's been over since the day you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive." They left with the door slamming behind them, the echo rattling through my empty house. I stood in the silence, my heart pounding, the folder of Frank's secrets locked against my chest. They knew. And now, they wouldn't stop until they had it. The next morning, the doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Too early for neighbors. Too precise for coincidence. Through the peephole, I saw them, a woman in a tailored navy suit holding a leather briefcase, and a younger man with a sleek tablet tucked under his arm. They looked like they'd stepped straight out of a law school catalog. I opened the door but did not invite them in. "Mrs. Sullivan?" the woman asked, her smile practiced, polished. "I'm Catherine Wells from Wells, Morrison and Associates. This is my colleague David Kim. We represent your son, Michael." The word "represent" made bile rise in my throat. "What can I do for you?" I asked coldly. Catherine's smile softened, rehearsed sympathy dripping from every syllable. "Your son is concerned about your well-being. He's asked us to discuss some options that might be beneficial for everyone involved." David tapped his tablet, sliding a digital document into view. "Specifically, we've prepared papers that would allow Michael to act as your power of attorney. Temporarily, of course. Just until you've had time to grieve properly." The words hit me like a script I had already read. Because I had, 6 months ago, in the investigator's report Frank left behind. Mike had been planning this exact move. "Temporarily," I repeated, my voice flat. "And who decides when my grieving period is over?" David hesitated. Catherine's smile never wavered. "That would be at your discretion, naturally." "Naturally." I almost laughed. "I appreciate your concern," I said, my hand tightening on the edge of the door. But I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Her smile thinned. Of course. But consider this. Accessing offshore accounts and conducting international transactions without professional guidance might appear erratic. To an outside observer, one might question whether you're making sound decisions. There it was, the threat. Sign the papers willingly, or they'd have me declared incompetent by force. I leaned against the doorframe, letting them see the fire in my eyes. You know what's interesting about threats? I said quietly. They only work if the person you're threatening doesn't have better lawyers than you do. For the first time, Catherine's mask cracked. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. I straightened, my voice calm, steady, sharp. You can tell my son that his plan won't work. Frank left me more than money. He left me protection. And with that, I shut the door in their faces. Inside the study, I pulled the investigator's report back into the light. At the bottom was a number. Handwritten in Frank's steady script, Thomas Chen, private investigator. I picked up the phone and dialed. Shen Investigations. A gravelly voice answered. This is Dorothy Sullivan, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Frank Sullivan's widow. There was a pause. Then, steady as stone, or Mrs. Sullivan. I've been expecting your call. Frank told me you might need my services someday. My grip tightened on the receiver. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Thomas Chen's office was nothing like the pawn shop, nothing like my quiet house. It was sleek and modern, glass walls and polished wood. The kind of place where secrets were cataloged and weaponized. He was waiting for me in a corner office. A man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and the steady calm of someone who had seen it all. He rose to shake my hand, firm and professional. Ms. Sullivan, he said, motioning for me to sit. Frank was a very thorough man. He left me with instructions should this day ever come. My chest tightened. You knew, I suspected, Chen replied. Frank wasn't paranoid, he was pragmatic. He believed his son might try to exploit you after his passing, so he prepared. He spread a thick folder across the mahogany desk. Pages spilled out, bank statements, photographs, transcripts. I recognized Mike's handwriting on some of the documents, loan applications that looked doctored. Chen tapped one section. Your husband had your home legally wired for sound. Every conversation Mike and Ashley had in your kitchen these last 12 months, recorded. Completely legal since Frank owned the property. My breath caught. He heard everything. Chen nodded gravely. Every insult about your mental state. Every plan to push you into a nursing facility. Every discussion about your husband's assets. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. Frank had known. He hadn't just suspected. He had listened. Chen slid another envelope toward me. He also documented Mike's gambling debts, Ashley's role in isolating you from friends and family, and the fraudulent loans tied to Sullivan Investments LLC. If your son attempts to claim power of attorney, we'll bury him in his own evidence. I stared at the pile of proof, anger and sorrow twisting together inside me. My husband had spent his last year fighting a battle I didn't even know existed. There's more, Chen said, his eyes steady on mine. He pulled out a sealed letter, my name written in Frank's familiar hand. I opened it slowly, my vision blurring as I read, My dearest Dorothy. If you're reading this, Mike has shown his true colors. Everything you need to protect yourself is here. The money is more than security, it is leverage. Use it to defend yourself, or to rebuild a life free from their shadows. The choice is yours. Always yours. Forever yours, Frank. The words swam before me. I felt the sting of tears, but beneath it burned a rising fire. For months, I had been stumbling in grief, blind to the storm circling me. But Frank had left me a shield, and maybe even a sword. Chen's voice pulled me back. Mrs. Sullivan, if you authorize me, I can file this evidence immediately. Mike will have no chance in court. In fact, he may be facing criminal charges. I looked at Frank's neat handwriting one more time. He had trusted me to decide how the story ended. For the first time since Frank's death, I felt something sharp, powerful, dangerous surge inside me. I authorize it, I said. My voice was steady, unflinching. Let's finish what Frank started. The following morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Frank's old mug clutched in my hands. For the first time in months, the coffee didn't taste bitter. It tasted like strength. At exactly 9:15, the quiet suburban street shattered. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of Mike and Ashley's house. Doors swung open, and men in dark windbreakers spilled out, FBI printed in bold white letters across their backs. I rose slowly, walking to the window. My breath fogged the glass as I watched them fan out across the lawn. Neighbors peeked through curtains, their faces pale with shock. The agents moved fast. Within minutes, they were carrying out boxes, computers, filing cabinets, stacks of papers. Ashley stood on the porch in silk pajamas, screaming at anyone who would listen. Her voice was shrill, furious, powerless. Mike emerged moments later, pale and hollow-eyed, his hands raised in defeat. For a second, I saw not the man who betrayed me, but the little boy who once clung to Frank's leg, crying on his first day of school. The image twisted like a knife in my chest. The phone rang. I startled, fumbling to answer. "Mom." Mike's voice was ragged, desperate. "What did you do?" I gripped the receiver, my eyes fixed on the FBI agent swarming his driveway. "I protected myself, Mike. Something you should have done for your family instead of trying to rob us." "You don't understand." He choked. "This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves," I said, my tone steady, cold. "I just documented it." In the background, I could hear Ashley screaming at agents, her voice breaking into sobs and threats. "Mom, please," Mike whispered. "You're my mother. Don't let them take everything." I closed my eyes. Frank's words from the letter echoing in my head, "The choice is yours, always yours." And for the first time, I realized how heavy that choice truly was. That night, after the FBI raid, the house was too quiet. Even the old radiator seemed to hesitate before groaning. I sat in the study, Frank's watchless wrist heavy with ghosts, replaying Mike's desperate voice in my head, "Mom, please. Don't let them take everything." I had wanted that plea for years. Any sign that my son still saw me as more than a burden, more than an obstacle between him and Frank's legacy. But the words had come too late, soaked in desperation, not love. The doorbell rang. My stomach clenched. I half expected federal agents or another lawyer. But when I looked through the peephole, I froze. A young woman stood on my porch, clutching her coat tight against the cold. Her face was thin, her eyes wide, nervous, but familiar. She had Mike's jawline, Frank's soft brown eyes. I opened the door slowly. "Melissa." She nodded quickly, almost as if afraid I'd slam the door. "Grandma Dorothy, it's me." I hadn't seen her since Frank's funeral, nearly a year ago. Ashley had made sure of that, whispering that I was fragile, confused, better left alone. "I should have called first," Melissa stammered. "But after what happened today, after the raid, I had to come." My throat tightened. "Come in, sweetheart, please." She stepped inside, glancing around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. I noticed how she twisted her hands together, a nervous habit I remembered from her childhood. We sat at the kitchen table. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Melissa blurted out, "I'm so sorry. For Dad, for Ashley, for everything." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You have nothing to apologize for." "I do," she insisted. "I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking me weird questions about Grandpa's finances, and Ashley, she kept saying you were losing your memory, that you didn't want us around anymore." I should have said something. I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. They were warm, trembling. "Melissa, you were caught in their web. You're here now. That's what matters." Her eyes welled with tears. Do you hate him?" "My dad." The question landed heavy, sharp. Did I? I thought about Frank's letter, the choice he'd left me. Forgive or let him face the consequences. I shook my head slowly. "I don't hate him. Hate would give him power over me. I choose peace instead." Melissa let out a sob, leaning into my arms like the child she once was. I held her tightly, realizing in that moment that my true inheritance wasn't money locked in some offshore account. It was the chance to give Melissa a future, untainted by her parents' greed. Later, as she prepared to leave, she paused at Frank's photograph on the mantel. "Grandpa wore that watch every single day. I always thought it was just because he liked it." I smiled sadly. "He wore it because he loved what it protected." Melissa's eyes met mine. "Then I'll help protect you too." When the door closed behind her, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. But hope, I knew, could be dangerous. Because if Melissa had found her way back to me, it meant Ashley and Mike might try harder than ever to tear me down. 3 days after the raid, the knock came. Not the nervous tap of a neighbor, not the sharp clang of an agent, but the deliberate rap of someone who expected to be obeyed. When I opened the door, A courier in a gray suit handed me a thick envelope stamped Cook County Court. Mrs. Sullivan.
Yes.
You've been served? I signed without a word. My fingers numb as I carried the packet into Frank's study. I slid it open with the letter opener Frank had used for decades, and my stomach turned at the first page. Petition to declare Dorothy Sullivan legally incompetent. Filed by Michael Sullivan. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I sank into Frank's chair, the walls of the study closing in. My own son was petitioning the court to strip me of my rights, to make himself my legal guardian. He was trying to take everything Frank had died protecting. The phone rang. I knew who it was before I answered. Dorothy. Ashley's voice oozed through the line. I assume you've received the documents. Don't take it personally. It's for your own good. My throat tightened. My own good. You've been acting erratic, she said sweetly. Accessing offshore accounts, accusing your son of terrible things. Judges don't look kindly on that. Best to let Mike handle everything from here. Behind her words, I heard the steel trap closing. If they succeeded, I would lose not just Frank's fortune but my freedom. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, but not with fear, with rage. I pulled Frank's folder from the locked drawer and spread its contents across the desk. Gambling debts, fraudulent loans, transcripts of whispered conversations in my kitchen. Every betrayal documented in black and white. Thomas Chen answered on the first ring. Mrs. Sullivan. They've filed it. I said, my voice cold. The petition to have me declared incompetent. I expected as much, he replied evenly. Are you ready to go public with what Frank left behind? I looked around the study, my gaze lingering on Frank's photograph. His eyes, steady, kind, determined, seemed to look back at me. I'm ready, I whispered. Chen's voice sharpened. Then it's time to bring this fight into the light. I'll file our counter motion tomorrow. By the time I'm finished, Michael won't just lose the petition. He'll lose everything. I closed the folder, my heart pounding. The war Frank had prepared me for had finally begun. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of scent that clung to rooms where leves were decided. I walked slowly toward the double doors of courtroom 4B, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step steady, deliberate. Mike and Ashley were already inside, sitting with their attorneys. Ashley wore a black dress, her hair pulled into a sharp bun, her expression molded into sympathy. Mike sat stiff beside her, eyes down. But I could feel his anger radiating across the room. The bailiff called for order, and the judge, a woman with gray hair and sharp glasses, looked down at us from the bench. Case number 22314, she said. Petition to declare Dorothy Sullivan legally incompetent, filed by her son, Michael Sullivan. Hearing the words spoken aloud was like being stabbed. My son had dragged me into court, ready to strip me of my voice. Mike's lawyer stood first, smooth as silk. Your Honor, this case is about concern, not greed. My client loves his mother dearly. But she has recently demonstrated troubling behavior, accessing offshore accounts, making erratic financial decisions, and accusing her son of theft without proof. He simply wishes to protect her. Protect me. The words made bile rise in my throat. When it was Thomas Chen's turn, he stood calmly, adjusting his glasses. His voice was steady, controlled. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of protection. It is a case of premeditated fraud and elder abuse. Frank Sullivan, the deceased, anticipated this very scenario and prepared extensive documentation. With the court's permission, we'd like to submit Exhibit A. The judge nodded. Chen carried a thick folder to the clerk. Within minutes, copies were distributed. I watched as Ashley leaned over to look, then stiffened. Her face drained of color. Mike grabbed the papers, flipping through, his hands trembling. Chen's voice cut through the silence. Exhibit A includes evidence of Mr. Sullivan's gambling debts totaling $180 and fraudulent loan applications tied to Sullivan Investments LLC, and documented inquiries into legal procedures for declaring his father incompetent prior to his death. The courtroom buzzed. The judge banged her gavel. Order, Mike's lawyer stammered. Your Honor, these documents are irrelevant. Ancient history, they don't prove. They prove intent. Chen interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. They prove a pattern of deceit, one that began long before Frank Sullivan's passing. And they prove that this petition is nothing more than an attempt to seize control of assets that do not belong to him. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across Mike's face. The judge leaned forward, her voice cool. "Mr. Sullivan, do you dispute these documents?" Mike opened his mouth, then closed it. Ashley's nails dug into his arm, but his words died in his throat. Chen didn't stop. He reached into his briefcase and placed a small black recorder on the table. "And if the court requires more than paper, we have audio. Recordings made legally inside the Sullivan residence, capturing conversations between Michael Sullivan and his wife Ashley regarding their plan to declare Dorothy Sullivan incompetent." The judge raised her brows. The entire courtroom went silent. My heart pounded. This was it, the moment Frank had prepared for, the trap he had built. And it was only the beginning. The courtroom was hushed, every eye fixed on the small black recorder Thomas Chen had placed on the table. Even the judge leaned forward, her pen frozen midair. "Your Honor," Chen said calmly. "These recordings were made legally by Frank Sullivan, inside his own home. They document conversations between Michael Sullivan and Ashley Sullivan regarding their plan to have Dorothy Sullivan declared incompetent." He pressed play. A familiar sound filled the room. My own kitchen, the echo of plates clinking faintly in the background. Then Mike's voice, low and sharp. "She's getting weaker. If we push just a little more, the court will sign off. Once Mom's declared incompetent, everything's mine." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My hands tightened on the wooden bench until my knuckles whitened. Ashley's voice followed, smooth and cruel. "Good. Once we've got control, we can liquidate the properties. Dorothy won't even know what hit her." Ashley shot up from her seat. "This is out of context," she shouted, her voice shrill. "This is illegal!" "She's twisting everything." The judge slammed her gavel. "Mrs. Sullivan, sit down or I will hold you in contempt." Ashley dropped back into her seat, her face blazing red, her composure shattered. Chen let the tape continue. Mike's voice again, softer this time, almost tired. "Sometimes I wonder if Dad knew. If he left something behind for her. A code. A message. We need to find it before she does." The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order twice before the noise died down. Mike's head fell into his hands. For the first time, he looked broken. Not the calculating man who had sold his father's watch, but a boy who'd lost his way so completely he couldn't find the path back. "Mr. Sullivan," the judge said sharply, "do you deny these are your voices?" Mike's lips parted, but no words came. Finally, he whispered, "No." Silence. Ashley glared at him like she could kill him on the spot. The judge leaned back, her expression steely. "This petition is not only denied. It appears to be a deliberate act of fraud upon this court. We will be forwarding this matter to the district attorney's office for review." I closed my eyes, my chest heaving. For months I had dreamed of justice. Now it was here, but instead of triumph, I felt only a hollow ache. Because across the aisle, my son looked at me with eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not greed, regret. When the gavel fell, signaling the end of the session, Mike rose unsteadily. For a moment, our eyes locked. His lips formed words too soft to hear, but I read them anyway. "I'm sorry, Mom." My heart twisted. But apologies don't rewind betrayal. Not when it came this late. When the courtroom emptied, I stayed behind for a long moment, my hands resting on the smooth oak bench. The gavel's echo still lingered in my ears. But louder than that was Frank's voice in my memory. "The choice is yours, Dorothy. Always yours." Mike and Ashley were escorted out by deputies, their faces pale, their future uncertain. For once, Ashley wasn't smirking. For once, Mike wasn't posturing. He looked back only once, his eyes red-rimmed, his lips forming words without sound. I'm sorry it was too late to save him from consequences. But maybe not too late to save myself. Outside, the cold Chicago wind bit my cheeks. Reporters clustered near the steps. Microphones flashing. I ignored them all. I wasn't a spectacle. I was a woman who had survived betrayal and was still standing. Melissa was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Her face lit up with relief when she saw me. She rushed forward, slipping her arm through mine. "Grandma, are you okay?" I looked at her. My granddaughter. The future Frank had wanted to protect. I am now. We walked together in silence. The courthouse loomed behind us, but I didn't look back. The war was over, and the battlefield was ashes. At home, I placed Frank's photo on the mantel beside his watch. The hands ticked steadily, keeping time as though nothing had ever happened. I whispered softly, "We won, Frank. Not with vengeance, with truth. I don't know what will happen to Mike. Prison, perhaps. Or maybe someday redemption. That choice isn't mine. My choice is peace. I'll live out my years by the lake, with Melissa by my side, and Frank's watch ticking on my wrist. A reminder that love, when it's real, protects long after the person is gone. The rest is unwritten. And maybe that's the way it should be. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people we raise and love the most. Dorothy's journey reminds us that betrayal can shatter trust, but it cannot erase dignity, strength, or the quiet power of truth. Forgiveness may heal, but justice protects. And sometimes, peace means choosing ourselves over those who hurt us. In the end, love is not measured by what we inherit, but by what we protect for the next generation. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Telling Story with me for more unforgettable stories. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Mike, or walked away like Dorothy did?